First, though, we want to get some more information about Canada sending help to fight those fires in California. To get that information, we're joined live now by Emergency Preparedness Minister Harjit Sajjan. Minister, good to see you. Thank you for making the time.
Hi, Vassy. Thank you.
You posted today that you had spoken with the administrator of FEMA, I believe. You said that Canada is ready to deploy 250 firefighters and other equipment. Will they for certain be headed to California, and if so, when?
So, first of all, as we can see, the unprecedented events that are taking place in Los Angeles, sadly, we've seen certain events that's taken place here in Canada, and the resources that we have put together from all across the country, the provinces, banded together. And I want to take particularly to thank Premier Ford, who has gathered resources very quickly as well. I know that right now California is looking at the equipment that we're sending, and then they will be sending us the actual requests when they deem it's needed. But one thing I do want to highlight, one of the things that what we have done, this is not just about sending resources. Since we do have a lot of experience in dealing with interface urban wildfires, not only we're sending the right resources, we're sending the right expertise. And that's something that our folks on the ground have already been in touch with the folks. But when the official request does come in, as I've spoken with the director of FEMA, and we'll be talking with their directly with the California folks, hopefully very shortly as well.
Do you anticipate, just based on the conversation you've had so far, that they will be asking for help? It would come, I think, as no surprise to Canadians who have been glued to these images, from our neighbors over the past few days. The destruction is pretty widespread. They're looking at it right now, in fact.
No, absolutely. And as you know, some help has already been provided. Some the water bombers have already gone in place. But and sadly, when you're dealing with an emergency, that they're tackling the emergency, but also looking at what type of resources. As good neighbors as we are, we've always worked well together. We've looked at what the situation on the ground is, and we've gathered together the right expertise with urban firefighters, the right equipment, and provinces from Alberta, Ontario, as you know, from Quebec, and even from British Columbia. And we're going to be sending the right expertise. And so that's why right now I want to make sure that we have the right conversations with folks. And when the official request comes in, from my accounts, from my conversation that I had with the director of FEMA, that the request will be coming, but some resources have already been deployed.
I have to ask you, sort of against the backdrop of what's going on politically, the idea that there's this tension around what we were just talking about, the Prime Minister reference, annexing Canada, the application of tariffs. Was there any hesitation on the federal government's part to offer these resources, given the pressures that we're under vis-a-vis these tensions?
Oh, absolutely not. In fact, actually, that's not what good neighbors do. We've got a very strong and very combined history together. So when it comes to this, I know so many Canadians were impacted. I know that they're not looking at those things. It's just about helping, and that's what good neighbors do. And like I said, Premier Ford was talking to him this morning, and ministers across the country providing for it. There was absolutely no hesitation.
You also sit, Minister Sajjan, on the cabinet committee that is tasked with focusing very much on the incoming administration. And there's been a lot of talk behind the scenes about what Canada will do if those tariffs are imposed. Officials on background are talking about it, but yourself and other ministers on that committee have yet to kind of spell out what counter tariffs would look like or what retaliation in general would look like. When do you plan to do that?
Well, first of all, can't give you a timeline on this. But one thing I can assure you, Canadians, that's something that we're taking very seriously. We have a lot of experience with this. The Prime Minister and our government has dealt with the Trump administration before. We have always come through. When we will have a response, but we'll do it at a manner when we think it's absolutely necessary. I've had the opportunity to meet with President Trump in the White House on a number of occasions as well. And what I found is that we've always been able to find a pathway forward because there's far more commonalities. And not only President Trump, his team around him also knows this. And this is a perfect example of what we're demonstrating in real time of what our relationship is really about.
Do you have any reason to believe, though, with great respect, Minister, that the president or the people around him are convinced about that? this time around. I don't take away from what you're saying on a factual basis. I understand how intertwined our economies are and how devastating tariffs would be on both sides of the border. But the president has done nothing since he got elected but double down on rhetoric aimed at Canada, despite you and your colleagues' insistence that you are, making the case.
Vassy, I do understand that. I mean, this has taken place before. But at the same time, when these discussions happen, it's if somebody doesn't, they will find out, because it's an impossibility for people not to fully appreciate that we are the number one trading partner. The U.S. relies on us just as much as we rely on them. That the cost of tariffs is going to be on the burden for both our citizens, and it's something that we're taking very seriously. Those who may not fully appreciate this, obviously there'll be opportunities for us to be able to show those numbers as well.
Are you, as a government at this point, able to take advantage of those opportunities when the leader of the opposition, for example, today used the term lame duck? I mean, the prime minister has just said he's stepping aside. We're going to have an election at some point. I think it's fair to say there is some internal domestic chaos going on. At this point in time, are you able to really be a voice for Canadians? Because I think right now what they're seeing is a lot of Doug Ford and Danielle Smith and not a lot of the federal government.
No, I'll be absolutely. Here probably I'd just like to use certain buzzwords and the chaos that's going on in his head. To be honest, I can't explain that. This is a normal portion of our democracy. They've gone through leaderships themselves. So is our party right now. In our democracy, there's always a government in place. There's a prime minister in place. That's Prime Minister Trudeau. There's a cabinet in place, and we are working diligently hard to making sure that we have the Canadians' best interest in mind. And right now, I can tell you, when it comes to this wildfire, is it just a perfect example of how our relationship continues. There's so much work that goes on a daily basis that people don't completely appreciate. And I can assure you that the Prime Minister Trudeau not only has a good relationship with President Trump, but is the right person to get a lot of these points across. And I can assure you we'll have a response as well.
Just one more question for you. And I do take your point on the fires and how that's emblematic of the strength of our relationship. But I'm going to have to respectfully challenge you on the relationship between Justin Trudeau and Donald Trump. I just spoke to John Bolton. We're going to play the interview in a moment. And he had the opposite to say of Trump's view of Prime Minister Trudeau. And again, I'll circle back to the idea that I get it's a normal part of democracy. But this quote unquote normal part of democracy is happening at a time when we're being threatened with economic devastation. Can you and your cabinet colleagues really see Canada through its way here?
Absolutely. I've been before. Like I said, I've been in many 3 meetings with President Trump. I've also seen our Prime Minister in action with him. What happens behind the scenes is very different sometimes. That happens sometimes in public, and especially when it comes to social media. And as you know, there's some people that love to use a certain platform, and I can assure Canadians. Not our Prime Minister is up to the task. We've done this before, but we also know that the challenges are currently different. But I can absolutely give confidence to Canadians that Canadian interests will always be at the top of mind, and we are definitely on this.
Okay, Minister Sajjan, I'm going to leave it there. We'll look to any updates from you and your department about what does get sent California's way. Appreciate your time this evening.
Absolutely. Nice talking to you.